But the theatre's magic, isn't it? You should know. Stand on this stage, say the right word with the right emphasis at the right time. Oh, you can make men weep or cry with joy. Change them. You can change people's minds just with the words in this place. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Shakespeare Code, written by Gareth Roberts and directed by Charles Palmer. This story tackles the subject matter of one William Shakespeare, one of the greatest writers that has ever lived in history, writing many plays like Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, A Midsummer's Murder, Midsummer's Dream in it, and of course Hamlet. This would be a very big important step into David Tennant's career as such, as this is kind of reflecting on his own experiences and his own upbringing. David Tennant as an actor was brought up playing many Shakespeare on play. In fact, he would later go on to play Hamlet in a BBC adaptation of Hamlet, a word-for-word version of the play for television. So you get to hear David Tennant do the infamous "to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis noble in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or take arms against a sea of troubles and by oppose and end them. To die, to sleep perchance to dream, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shelved aught this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's a respect that makes calamity of such long a life, for who would bear the whips and scarrows of time?" I've probably missed a bit after that, but so yeah, this was a big part of David Tennant's legacy as the Doctor, because it's him meeting William Shakespeare. It's also Martha Jones' first trip in the TARDIS. This story emphasizes the fact that this is the Doctor's promising Martha a one trip just to say thank you, and then he's going to take her back, which is very strange because I don't think any other companion has had this sort of treatment. It's very strange. Obviously, the narrative thread is that he's missing Rose and he doesn't want someone to replace Rose, even though Rose is just a one of a many line of companions. But the idea is that Rose is the one he was in love with, which as a Doctor Who fan, you kind of know that I'm not too keen on that idea. Thing as well, I want to get this out of the way because it's not really part of the story itself, but mainly the political stance of this adventure many years down the line. For you see, this is a story written by Gareth Roberts, and this story mentions on a few occasions Harry Potter and just how amazing J.K. Rowling is. This is a sad part of this story because Gareth Roberts and J.K. Rowling would, in the years to come out as hugely transphobic, which is a shame because, the trans community is a very vulnerable state when they voice their disgusting opinions, which hurt many people in the trans community, and that is just a shame. And despite my opinions on this story, whether or not, I want to state this right off the bat. This story does not, whether I like this story or not, it does not justify that transphobic mindset. I am hugely against transphobic remarks like the one Gareth Roberts and J.K. Rowling have stated in the future of compared to this story, later on, and sadly that is something that has been connected to this story because it's a writer who later came out as transphobic, writing a story which mentions a lot of another transphobic writer and how brilliant she is. Um, you know, and it's a very hurtful environment for a minority group of people, people who, who have sadly high rates of suicide due to mindsets like the one that Gareth Roberts and J.K. Rowling popularize, the idea that, you are what you're born as, which is, you can't change that. That is just a disgusting mindset. And despite what might think about this story, that mindset is just wrong, just plain and simply wrong. Okay? So I just want to state that whatever I think about the story, it does not justify those view sets. And I'm going to treat the story with the death of the author mindset, in which I'm going to take this out of any relationship with its writer and view it as a completely separate entity of media. That being said, I really love this story. It's fun-packed, it's action-packed. Sure, there's a lot of issues, but we'll get onto them when we talk about them. And it's one of those stories I really remember watching growing up. I love everything about it, from the set design, which is, fun fact, one of the most expensive sets that was ever made for Doctor Who. Don't get me wrong, it's really great sets, really great environment, but one of the most expensive Doctor Who stories. It doesn't look like that big, but later sets would be reused for the Sarah Jane adventures, so they got their money's worth either way. So there you go. I do have the copy on DVD, but I'm not going to show it to you because it's only got a cover really that represents Smith and Jones, the first episode of Series 1. This is obviously the second episode of Series 2. So that out of the way, what does the majority of people think? From what I can gather, there's a handful of people who really like this story, and a handful of people who find this story a very weak entry to the series. I guess you can guess which one I am. But this story introduces the Carrier Knights, these creatures which would actually return in a 6th Doctor audio adventure in the Classic Doctor's new box set, Volume 2. Story which I haven't tackled because as I'm recording this, and the time I recorded my 6th Doctor era of the marathon, I did not own those stories, which is a sad shame. But anyway, so let's get into the narrative at hand, shall we? The story starts off with a great little homage to Romeo and Juliet, as we have the man playing music as this woman. She's looking out the window and she's all taken back by his lovely music, and takes him up to her room in her house, only to discover that the room is kind of a very miserable place. As the man describes it, this can't be a place where one so beautiful lives. It quickly revealed that she is actually a creature that resembles very closely to a witch, which is a reference to the Shakespearean play Macbeth, in which Macbeth himself goes and meets 3 witches, which this story does have 3 witches. This story has a lot of Shakespearean references like that. And that is our pre-credit scene. It's a pretty good it's a pretty decent pre-credit scene. It gives off the feeling of what this story is right off the bat. It's a cheesy but fun adventure. You got these witch characters that are playing it up to 11. They've got their fingers doing this, and they've got these really silly masks with the nose on, and they're overplaying. The actors are overplaying it, but they're clearly having fun. which then leads into our story of the Doctor and Martha arriving in this time period. Now, when the story introduces us, we get a lot of the familiar tropes we have with companions in their first adventure. Actually, I say familiar. For Doctor Who, it's actually surprisingly rare, where companions are concerned about the effects of time travel. But this makes sense. Martha Jones is a doctor, or at least she's trying to train up to be one. And so she has a much more, I don't want to say intelligent, because that implies like all the other companions, or the majority of other companions were dumb in that sense, but she's not. She is a lot more mindful, you know, she has all of these logical questions to bring out the Doctor. For example, and she brings up the butterfly effect, and the Doctor seems to be not dissing her concerns, but doesn't seem to be taking it all that seriously. This plays into the trope of the white man history, as somebody once said, I can't remember who it is, but time travel is a fantasy specifically for white people. As people of colour, their history would be, you know, like full of slaves and torture and all that. Although, as the story states, you know, that wasn't really always the case. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was slaves and there was horrible things done to this particular group of people. But, you know, there were free people. Well, it sounds like I'm trying to justify it. This episode's going to be really controversial, I can gather. But the main point is that Martha's making all of these very logical concerns, and the Doctor is just kind of enjoying himself, and is like Martha's like, what if I kill my own grandfather? And the Doctor points and is like, are you going to kill your own grandfather? Are you planning to? And Martha's like, no. Good then don't kill your grandfather then. Martha also is like, should I be concerned? I'm not exactly white, am I? The Doctor's like, don't worry, I'm not even human. Just act like you own the place. It works for me. Which is actually something the Doctor has once said, or he said similar to, with Ace during Silver Nemesis. So I don't know if that's a tie to that, or, you know, it's linked in with that. I don't know. But the Doctor is, basically, he's hesitant that this is a one-trip event. He's just taken her to this time period to show her how amazing time travel is, before quickly going back so that the Doctor can be alone again, moaning over the tragedy of Rose, in a sense. And this aspect is really my only big criticism with this story. The Doctor's mindset of Martha and their relationship with Rose makes the Doctor feel really like a dick. A great example, or should I say a terrible example of this, would be the bed scene later on in the story when they're trying to work out the mystery of these deaths that have been occurring, and they go to bed. The Doctor looks at Martha and is like, something I'm missing, something right in front of me, but I'm missing it. It's right in front of me. It's a shame Rose isn't here. Rose would know. Rose will know everything. One, no, she wouldn't. She would be in the exact same position as Martha. Rarely has Rose given away such a big element of the story like that, with very little clues to go off with. In fact, at this point of the story, the Doctor and Martha don't even know that there are these witches. They know that something is trying to at least resemble a witch, but they don't know anything about it. There's no way Rose in the same story would have gotten in a different place from where Martha is now. 2, this story brings up the idea that the Doctor is in love with Rose and that Rose is just this amazing companion, and that Martha's just a knockoff, a replacement for Rose, and that's really all that is to her. That just really underlines the issue, because it makes it harder for a viewing audience to connect with Martha, because for those of you who are huge fan of Rose Tyler, this story basically is like, yeah, Rose was amazing, wasn't she? Without going, it's like, oh look, Martha Jones, she has her own great quirks and her own personality, try her out. The story, like with the previous adventure, does show a lot of great Martha moments, but with the Doctor's, his whole reaction with the Rose and stuff, it just makes the audience who liked Rose, who were pining for Rose, just pine for her even more, without considering what harm this is doing as a script to the characters that we have now. 3, despite this being a plot element of the Doctor's story, it's something that never really gets resolved. The Doctor just sort of is like, oh, Rose was amazing, wasn't she? Every few episodes, and that's really it. It's not something that he has to work against. It's not something that he is that is a character flaw. It's just something the Doctor just misses Rose because Rose was just so perfect. I got a funny feeling this element was specifically made by Russell T Davies. But yeah, that's just a massive rant out of the way. But I will say, that's my only real criticism. The Doctor takes Martha to the legendary Globe Theatre to watch Love's Labour's Lost, one of famous Shakespearean play, where they actually get to be met with William Shakespeare. Now, as a script, I know a lot of people have a lot of issue with how William Shakespeare is portrayed in this story. This is the first time that William Shakespeare has appeared in Doctor Who since his cameo in The Chase, the first Doctor adventure, the third Dalek story, The Chase. How mental is that? And it is also the first time he's even been mentioned since The City of Death, in which the Doctor has stated, he once met Shakespeare. The Doctor doesn't seem to have acted like he's met Shakespeare before, which is very strange. But apparently it was scripted that they were going to mention about his encounter, which was mentioned in The City of Death. But they didn't want to confuse newer audiences, so those scenes got cut, which is a shame for a fan, but for the story, for the narrative at hand, it does make sense. But anyway, I've gone a little bit off topic. The issue that people have with how Shakespeare is played in this story is that he's basically the perfect individual. He is I can't remember what the male term for Mary Sue is. He's basically a Mary Sue, a character who literally does no wrong, and everybody glorifies how amazing he is. And though Shakespeare is a remarkable man, it didn't just come out of thin air like the story implied. He put a lot of hard work and effort into his writing. He wasn't this god, though yes, his writings would go on to live in as legends of how scripts and how plays should be written. He was still a human being. He still had faults. He still had things. But this story kind of implies that he was basically the perfect human being. In fact, without any sort of training, without any sort of knowledge of future events, he actually sees the psychic paper as just a blank piece of paper. Yeah. But I will say, for this story, the story is easily a fan fiction, shall we say, to the works of Shakespeare. And I think where this gets it, I wouldn't say get it right, but how this story works, where other stories kind of fail when it's doing this, is that despite Shakespeare being the Mary Sewers character, it doesn't really represent the real person, but shows what Shakespeare is in the mind of a fanboy, somebody who can literally do no wrong. From this story's perspective, he's not the main character. The main character is the Doctor and Martha, who do have flaws, who do have characterizations, who do have limits. And Shakespeare just kind of gets caught up in all this, which means that our plot isn't just going, oh, Shakespeare, what an amazing individual. He's so perfect. Which does kind of become an issue at the end of this adventure, but the directing, the performances are just so well realised that they play out it so well. So anyway, Shakespeare announces on the stage that he's actually writing a sequel to Love Labour's Lost. Love Labour's Won. Now this is very important to Shakespearean fans, as Love Labour's Won is actually the famous Lost play, a play which Shakespeare might have written. It's written down as in a list of plays he had written back then, but there is no trace of it in modern day, and some even suspect that it wasn't actually a real play, but rather a misspelling of Love Labour's Lost, or a working title for Love Labour's Lost. But this story implies that it is a real sequel to the events. And what I love about this is that because the Doctor's such a Shakespearean fanboy, he knew straight away that that something is wrong here, and asks Martha for him to investigate. As they go investigate, we then witness the murder of this man who plans to cancel the play, which sort of quickly seems to resolve the issue before he gets murdered, allowing for Love Labour's Won to be performed the day after, in which Shakespeare sort of announced it too early. It was supposed to come out 2 weeks, but thanks to some mind control interventions by the witches, he announces it for the night after. And so the Doctor, wow, that was really bad. Doctor, Martha and Shakespeare are basically investigating what's happening, as there's soon another murder near Shakespeare. When he falls asleep, or apparently falls asleep, we see that one of the witches hypnotizes him into quickly finishing the play, but adding a few extra lines into making it a sort of code, if you will, to open a gateway with the Globe's Theatre. We also learn that the Globe's Theatre was actually created by a sort of I don't want to say slave, sort of a somebody who was being controlled by the witches to make it a 14 wall theatre, and this sort of has an energy source that amplifies like an energy converter to Shakespeare's words. This means that it can open this mythical gateway. And the Doctor slowly puts together that these creatures, they are something which are incredibly old, incredibly ancient. These creatures are carrier knights. I don't know if the word carrier knights was ever used in a Shakespearean play, but I tell you what was used in a Shakespearean play, sycorax. Shakespeare came up with the word sycorax. Bet you didn't know that. And there's like a nice little reference to that at the end of the story when the doctor holds up a skull and references that it looks like a sycorax. But before I get into much more of the adventure, I just want to state how gorgeous this story is playing out. The acting is on top form. The directing with the lighting, the cinematography, the editing, the small little nuances to Shakespeare's play. One thing that I actually noticed during my viewing for the marathon, this Doctor Who marathon, is that when we go into Shakespeare's office after the owner of the Globe Theatre died, we see it through the doorway, but in the foreground there's actually a skeleton underneath a melting candle. A skull, for those of you who don't know, was a infinite part in a few of Shakespearean's play, most noticeably in Hamlet, when Hamlet holds the skull of his old dear friend. I can't remember who it was. It's like the babysitter. Hamlet's old babysitter. I can't remember for the life of me what his name is. A lot of people misremember this scene. I don't know if it's like a Mandela effect of the scene in which Hamlet holds the skull and is talking to the skull to be or not to be. That is the question scene. That is not the case. Yeah, that might have blown some people away who aren't too familiar with Shakespeare's plays. But yeah, those two elements of Hamlet, they are completely different scenes. But you don't know that. But anyway, so the Doctor basically learns that these are carrier knights. These creatures, I can't remember if they're from the Dark Times, but they surely have been long enough that they are arch enemies to the Eternals, a race of alien creatures that we've actually, pan-dimensional creatures that we actually seen before in the Doctor Who story Enlightenment. Nice little references, classic Who reference there, to which they said that the Eternals have actually found a word to dismantle, to vanish away the carrier knights, but only 3 escaped after Shakespeare, who, after the loss of his own son and is full of grief and anger, used the right words, to use the right chain of language to bring back the carrier knights into the real world again. And their plan is basically to use Shakespeare into releasing their army. And Shakespeare and the Doctor basically have to stop Love's Labour's one. First, the Doctor goes up to the carrier knight's house, which he gets the information from the architecture of the Globe Theatre, as he sends William Shakespeare to try and stop the play. He does succeed sort of at first, before the carrier knight uses a sort of voodoo doll to knock him out, and everybody else just believes he's got on stage drunk, and so they quickly chuck him behind the scenes for him to sober up, essentially. So the play continues to go on. We then get a scene in which Martha tries to reveal the carrier knight's name, a weapon against the carrier knights, but it doesn't work because apparently that word weaponry thing only works once. The carrier knight does it to Martha, which knocks her out, not killing her, due to the fact that she is out of her time, out of her environment. And when the carrier knights use it on the Doctor, nothing happens. This quickly implies that, what I really like this is that it actually gives us a sort of explanation, if you will, on why the Doctor doesn't actually use his real name. Because in certain races, in certain sciences, your name could be used as a weapon against you. And what's really great is that the story doesn't go, oh, that's the reason why Doctor Who. So you can keep yourself protected from all these monsters who have this this really powerful way of killing people. But you can connect the dots. You can be like, wait a minute, the Doctor is safe from these very ancient creatures because he doesn't use his real name and uses the name the Doctor instead. So could that be because that's the reason why he doesn't use his real name? That would make a lot of sense. So there could be a small canon fixer there. But like I said, what really works about this little canon moment for all of you canon heads out there is that the story doesn't quickly state this out, and that's mainly left up to fans, fan theories, fan interpretations of it. So I personally like that idea. And the Carrier Knight does this thing where it tries to stab the Doctor's heart with a voodoo doll, but the Doctor actually has two hearts. The Carrier Knight doesn't know this. And Martha is easily able to revive him after a nice little funny moment in which the Doctor's only got one heart working and complains. It's like, how do you humans bear with just one heart? And we get like a nice little comedic moment before the Doctor, Martha and Shakespeare get on stage during the event of the Carrier Knights being released into the real world. Now, before I get into the conclusion of this story, another thing I need to absolutely praise with this story, Murray Gold's music. Something which is actually surprisingly rare for Doctor Who is that the entire soundtrack has been adapted, if you will, into a style that fits the genre or the era that the story is telling. This story uses a lot of what they call like old-fashioned guitar string thing that they pick on, kind of music, that old-fashioned kind of theme, which actually gives us a Shakespearean style version of Martha's theme, and it sounds absolutely gorgeous. But we do have some very modern kind of orchestra, Murray Gold music with the choir bursting out. A great example is the final battle, in which the music just builds up and builds up and builds up. And the music then represents the Carrier Knights, who are a lot more older than this civilization can even imagine. So the fact that it doesn't use a style similar to the time setting actually does fit, and it's so nuanced, it's so well put together. Murray Gold's music really gets the heart pumping. Now this is what I was talking about. This story has a like an issue which I think a lot of people, rightfully so, criticize this story. But like I said, as somebody who was really enjoying this, really invested in this, really got worked up in the adventure, I think it really works, in which the Carrier Knights are basically let loose and nothing can stop them. But the Doctor has a plan. He basically inspires William Shakespeare to try and improvise new words, new ways of language, to try and trap the Carrier Knights once more, because he is the wordsmith, the smartest man in the universe. As Shakespeare gets up on stage and quickly comes up with, full of confidence, as he comes up with these words to inspire, to imprison the Carrier Knights once more. Now, I think the main issue here that people have is that we could have had an adventure of Shakespeare basically gaining up his confidence, and this scene could have been a great representation of that. But that never happens. The story starts off with Shakespeare already being this amazing this amazing word master who can put these magical sentences that can make people cry or people full of glee. And when the Doctor kind of inspires him, it's less to do with Shakespeare's confidence or anything to do with his character, and more of the Doctor needing, trying to work out how to defeat the Carrier Knights, and basically is a Deus Ex Machina. But again, I think it kind of works here because Shakespeare's words are just that memorable, and yes, it does kind of feel like the fanficky, this kind of wow, isn't Shakespeare so amazing? Look how amazing he is. He could defeat his the bad guys with just his words. That he just came up on the spot. How amazing is Shakespeare? Whoever doesn't like Shakespeare is an idiot. That kind of attitude. But I don't know, the caught up, the action, the camera work, the lighting, that purple glow of the purple and reds of the storm with a bunch of Carrier Knights getting summoned out into this real world as red lightning just strikes around the place. That camera angle showing above the Globe's Theatre, one of the few aerial shots in this adventure, basically showing the point of view, in a sense, if you will, to the Carrier Knights, which is some very nice imagery there. And I think it just, I don't know, I can't describe it. If you are someone who doesn't like this ending and criticise it for its place in the story and how it has a massive missed opportunity to give Shakespeare in this story a real thick character arc, then you have every right to criticise it. There is stuff to criticise about it. But I just get so worked up into it. And the pacing, the acting, the directing, the script that we're given is just so fun. It's just so fun. And so the Carrier Knights get locked up, and the Doctor takes the orb, which now carries the three Carrier Knights, into the TARDIS, where they can exist there for all eternity. And the Doctor and Martha are basically talking to Shakespeare, and Shakespeare basically works out that they are time travellers. The Doctor is an unknown area, and Martha Jones is from the future. It's not that hard to work out, as Shakespeare stated. The Doctor's like, oh, that is good. Before we get another big part for canon heads, and that is the Doctor Who introduction. Actually, is there an introduction? I can't remember if she also appeared in The Chase. I'll have to rewatch the Shakespeare cameo in The Chase to witness, but this might be then the first appearance of Queen Elizabeth I in a Doctor Who story. And the Doctor is originally like, oh my god, it's so amazing, another historical figure that I've been dying to meet. But she recognises the Doctor as her mortal enemy as she summons her guards to kill him as he run off to the TARDIS. Martha's like, what the hell have you done? The Doctor's like, I don't know. From my point of view, I haven't even met her yet. That's time travel for you. And that's how the story ends, on a nice little semi-cliffhanger, which actually doesn't get resolved until the 50th anniversary, the Day of the Doctor. How mental is that? This story teases up a plot element which doesn't get resolved until a massive Doctor Who event. So that's something. And there you go. That's the Shakespearean Code. Overall, yes, it has a few issues, mainly from the plot element. Some things don't add up. Some things in terms of narrative structure is a very odd choice. And the story kind of feels fanficky for Shakespeare's work, as they just treat Shakespeare as this amazing, just one of the best people who have ever lived in this world, and he could do no wrong. But that being said, as a fan fiction to Shakespeare, it does a very good job, and you can see the love and passion that has been given to this adventure. The costumes and the scenery with BBC's trademark for doing some really great period settings shines out in this adventure, and the Doctor and Martha having some really great moments. But it has one of the worst scenes in series 3, the bed scene, in which the Doctor is just basically it's like, Martha, you're basically useless. Rose would be so much better now. That is just such a stupid scene. And like I stated in my talking about the narrative section, this story has sadly some very negative connotations with transphobic views now connected with this story, thanks to its writer and the mention of another writer who also share that disgusting mindset. So if you are one person who wants to forget about the story, that wants to don't act like this story doesn't deserve your viewing pleasure, then I think that's completely justified. But I think I am kind of disappointed in myself to say that I just guilty pleasure then. It's a guilty pleasure of mine because I do really love this story and I just had so much fun with it. And it always takes me back to when I was a kid watching this story for the first time after being so well invested in this series thanks to the previous story which kicked off the series, and this just continuing my love for the franchise. It just clicked with me in all the right places. So there you go, that's the Shakespearean Code. So join me next time when we go back to Cardiff as Gwen Cooper, Jack, Owen, Toshika and Yanto discover a strange device which makes you see ghosts. So I'll see you next time for The Ghost Machine, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!